Hi everyone. I'll give us a few minutes for people to join and for Sarah and James to find us. I'll just give us a little introduction while we're waiting for people. So I'm Holly Race. I am the author of an urban fantasy trilogy called Midnight's Twins, A Gathering Midnight and A Midnight Dark and Golden. And I'm really excited to be interviewing today two brilliant UKYA authors. First up, we have Sarah Daniels, who was born and grew up in Derby, and her debut YA novel, The Stranded, just came out in July. And we also have James Goodhand, who is the author of two YA thrillers focusing on toxic masculinity and mental health. So I'm just going to get Sarah and James in. Give me a moment. Let's see. Hopefully we should have them join soon. Hi James, hi Sarah.
Hello, you're right.
Yeah, you?
Good, thank you very much. Good.
I'm taking it you can hear me okay from the fact that you're answering.
You're up a little actually. There we are. That's better.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
All good. Good.
Marvelous. Okay, so as you both know, we've got 20 minutes maximum for 5 quick fire questions. So we're gonna jump right in. First up, can you tell us about your latest book and what inspired it? James, would you like to go first?
Oh yeah, no worries. Here it is, man down. Always keep a copy to hand. So this is a part supernatural thriller, and it's part sort of gritty contemporary. Our protagonist, Will Parks, he's 17. He's a little socially anxious and unpopular, perhaps. Now, Will is being followed. Somebody unseen is watching over him and feeding him glimpses of the near future. Now, as these sort of supernatural tip-offs prove accurate time and again, Will begins to trust them, and he starts finding out what life has to offer when you're not scared of what's around every corner. But these messages, they don't exist just to make Will popular. They have a purpose. A tragedy is coming, and Will is the only person who may be able to stop it, but only if he's prepared to step up and be the man that he needs to be. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. In terms of what inspired it, there's sort of a few themes I'm playing with. I mean, masculinity is a bit of a hobby horse of mine. I don't want to say toxic masculinity because it's a bit divisive, but it's about modern masculinity, the way we bring up our boys, the search for identity for young men, where on the one hand, the old norms of masculinity are dead, but there's still a certain type of man that is championed, the heartbreaker, the shagger, and actually we haven't dispelled that, and people are having an identity crisis. So I like to write about that, but also there's the supernatural bit, which is to do with get stuck into some philosophical stuff around human consciousness and the grey area. But grey area between life and death. And so there's two different things going on. The thing that people compare it to is perhaps they both die at the end, but there's also a fairly strong, I would say, like Donnie Darko vibe. So if you're into that, you probably enjoy the book.
Amazing. That sounds absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Sarah, would you like to?
Yeah, well, I feel like my themes are maybe not as deep as that now with this adventure story. So this is The Stranded. This is my debut novel, and it came out on the 21st of July. And it was inspired by a picture of a refugee ship that was kind of laden down with people that was fleeing the Second World War. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what if they couldn't get off at the other end and nowhere wanted them? And so out of that, I thought, okay, they would need to live there, they'd need to survive there, and then the Arcadia was born from that. So the story follows Esther and Nick, who are two teenagers who were born on the ship and were never allowed to leave. And they both have a kind of a plan to escape from the ship, but they take very different routes to it. So Esther's the good girl who studies and works hard, and she collaborates with the government in order to get this new life that she wants. Whereas Nick is part of a rebellion who's determined to free everybody aboard the ship. So when they get thrown together, they not both of them can succeed, essentially.
Amazing. Strong kind of speculative and thriller elements in.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, question 2. What is the weirdest or most interesting thing you had to research for this book? Sarah, would you like to go first?
Well, I had to do loads of research on cruise ships because I've never been on one. So I did loads of research. I watched loads of YouTube videos about cruise ships, and I watched in particular one person who actually got stranded on one. He was a staff member when COVID hit, and he spent months on these deserted cruise ships under quarantine. So I watched a lot of that, and they're very strange places. They have their own waste management system, so I know what happens when you flush the toilet on a cruise ship. I know kind of what happens when people die on a cruise ship, or if they need to arrest somebody on a cruise ship. So lots of very strange things that I never imagined I would ever need to understand. And then maybe in terms of weirdness, I had to research how much force you would need to dislocate somebody's fingers. So that's probably the thing that stuck with me the most.
It's one you don't want anyone monitoring.
Yeah.
Amazing. James, how about you?
Nothing. That's fascinating. I mean, that's I've not looked into anything like that. To be honest, in Man Down, I've learnt an awful lot on my own experience. I've had lots of sort of dead end jobs over the years, and so I've just used a lot of my own experience. My more interesting research really went into my first book, which was Last Lesson, which was about a school bombing, and that was where I really did have to be a bit careful, because I mean there's basically bomb making instructions in the book, and you can't look those up on the internet. But actually, it's amazing if you start. I mean, I got it all from my granddad, even down to using a disposable camera as a detonator. Just old people know this stuff. It's amazing. If you want to know about bombs or explosives, just ask someone who preferably served in the Home Guard. Because it's amazing, because of course, in the 1940s, if you knew how to blow shit up, you were a bit of a legend. Whereas obviously now it's frowned upon. So he's very useful for that. But on the subject of research, my favourite sort of research thing is just the sheer sort of banality of some of it. Like in Last Lesson, there was a game of top trumps, and I just made that up off the top of my head. And when it went to copy edit, the copy editor was like, well, have you got this deck of top trumps? Because it has to be correct if they're playing a game. And so I had to then spend a Saturday looking around charity shops, finding an accurate deck of top trumps and adjusting the scene accordingly. So these are the standards that we're kept to in fiction, basically. There's only so much we can make up.
Right. Fantasy, you can make anything up, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I reckon even in fantasy, if you ever gave a top trump, someone will make you go out and buy them.
True. Brilliant. Okay, question number 3. I'm just looking. We're right for time. What is your writing process like? James?
Process is a very generous term for my chaotic writing activity. I mean, I genuinely write in a workshop. That's not just crap that I made up to put, for my like author bio. So I'll be working on a car, and then I'll sit down and I'll write for a bit. So I'm rather haphazard like that, although working with your hands is quite good for freeing up the bit of your brain that sort of thinks up ideas. But I'm guessing this question is a bit about like, do you plan or do you just do it by the seat of your pants? And I think writing is an interesting thing. I don't know if everyone finds this, but I think it just develops a life of its own. There's only so much you can plan. You invent characters, and they grow personalities, and they start doing things, or you start wanting to do horrible things to them because they're horrible. So it kind of goes off. It's like, it's not a process. It's an entirely organic thing. Although I am a fan of a graph, I think that good stories require constant character development, and if you have a graph of time against change in someone's character, you can kind of go back on against word count all the time and check how your character should be behaving and how far they should have developed. So I do that, but that's as close to anything you might call a process that I'm capable of.
That's totally legitimate. Brilliant. Sarah, how about you? How does your process work?
Yeah, I also have no process really. I'm a very early writer. I tend to get up about 3 a.m. and just.
That's late. That's not early. That's late night.
It's true. And yeah, I just don't. I'm such a messy writer. I just sit and write until I've got a kind of awful 50,000 words, and then I go back to the start. I don't have any rules about editing. I'll edit as I go along. I'll edit second time round. I don't know where the story's going to go until I get there. The only thing I really know is that I like cliffhangers, so there are a lot of ends of chapters where there's a cliffhanger. But yeah, other than that, it's just really write and get the words down.
Love a cliffhanger. Totally with you there. And next question: what is the worst thing you've ever done to one of your characters? This seems to segue nicely from James's point about suddenly going, I don't like you. I'm going to do something awful to you. So James, would you like to go first on this one again?
Look, I mean, I do awful things to my characters. I really do. I mean, it's difficult to think of what I've done that's worse. The thing is sometimes it's the small things that are really human that are the worst things you can ever do to a character. Because literally in Man Down, spoiler alert, it's not really a massive spoiler, but our main character Will Parks gets killed by an express train, not once but twice. Literally once accidentally and once deliberately. If you want to know how something, you have to read the book to understand how that works. But so literally, I'd had him smashed to pieces by a train. But there are probably worse things that we've, on his way to try and save the day. He gets stuck in some barbed wire, and that's actually much worse in a way. And the girl he loves, he has to listen to his brother shagging her through a wafer-thin bedroom wall. I mean, that's probably worse. Really, it's on a par with being hit by a train, I would have thought. So, yeah, I'm just horrible to them, but that's what gets me through the day.
Slightly terrifying, but totally understand. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Obviously, there are lots of horrible things that happen in dystopia, lots of physical things, but the kind of unrequited love, I think, is and then loss of people is the way to really mess with your characters. But I also quite like figuring out what they're scared of. So the Room 101 from 1984. So I quite often figure out what the person's scared of, and then you can pretty much be certain that they're going to face that at some point during the book. So one of my characters, Esther, she lives on the ship, but she's afraid of what's in the water because she never gets down to the water. So yeah, she does end up in the drink at some point during the book.
I love that. That's a great tip. Fantastic. We have a bit of time on the clock, so we'll go into our final question, and then we have had one question from our viewers as well, which I will ask you afterwards. So final question: what are some books you think should be on any UKYA summer reading list, and what's on yours? Sarah, would you like to go first on this one?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a big fan of summer, so I've already transitioned into autumn. So I'm all about the gothic, spooky stories. And I wanted to recommend The Deathless Girls which is a retelling of the Brides of Dracula. And yeah, it's just gothic and good and creepy, so that's really good. And then I wanted to recommend Kat Delacourte's book that I've just finished, and it's not out yet. She's not technically UKYA, but she is published by Penguin in the UK, so I'm being a bit cheeky. But this is a paranormal romance set in an Italian town where they still burn witches at the stake. And there's a love square in it, which I really enjoyed. So that's that. And then on my to read list, I've got Rebel Skies, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, the concept just one of those strange imaginations that I can't wait to get into. And then I've just finished watching Only Murders in the Building on Netflix, which is really good. And so I've got a mystery as well, The Agathas.
Ooh, and who is that by?
This is by Kathleen Glasgow and Liz Lawson.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very, very good recommendations. Thank you. James, how about you?
So I'm currently reading You Can Trust Me by Gina Blackstone, which is great. I'm about a quarter of the way through because I'm in the slow readers club. But that's great. Just sort of getting stuck into posh boys and them abusing their privilege. So if you haven't already had enough of that watching the Tory leadership election, then read You Can Trust Me. It's a bit of light relief. Also, I'm a massive fan of Louisa Reed. Activist is on its way, which I'm really looking forward to. Anything by her is great. I've just read it again, not strictly speaking YA, but The Poet by Louise Reed is fantastic. It's a bit of it's wonderful, but it's slightly depressing because she's a writer. She's a real writer's writer, and just reminds the rest of us to feel a bit inferior. That's what I find. What I would say, read any of stuff like Wrecked or Gloves Off, whatever. They're all fantastic, but they have to be read slowly. It's a bit like you wouldn't wolf down a Michelin star meal, and that's the sort of what it's like with Louise's prose. So you've really got to take the time to enjoy it. It's fantastic. And also, having watched a few of these shorts earlier last week, Luke Palmer's Grow looks really fascinating. That hadn't really come onto my radar, but it's bit like what I did with Last Lesson. It seems like it's about extremism and it's about good people doing bad things, which is a really fascinating area. So I'm probably going to get stuck into that. And also, I highly recommended 10 Steps to Us by Atir Khan. I saw actually Atir picked up my work last night. Thanks for watching. Returning the favour, but not just Return the Favour. It's a fantastic book, so that's worth a crack as well.
Brilliant. That's an excellent list of books for everyone to add there.
And The Stranded, of course. The Stranded, which I read the first few pages of earlier today, and fantastic, great opening. So I will be getting stuck into it.
We've just got a few minutes left, so before we run out of time, we have a question from Karen Harding. How do you motivate yourself to keep writing on days when you are lacking motivation? I don't know if either of you have got any tips on that. Do you push through? Do you give yourself?
It's a job. You've just got to get on with it. I mean, that's the thing. You won't always be inspired, and the trouble is, if you wait to be inspired, it just won't happen. Whereas if you get stuff down on you've got to get something on the page. Basically, I know it's a cliche, like you can't edit a blank page. It's very true. So you've just got to push through. Really, that's all you can do. It's a little easier for us to say now because usually someone's paying us to do it. But even before that was the case. You just have to. You're never always going to be inspired, and you've just got to keep pushing.
Yeah. If I can't find the motivation, it's usually because I'm writing in the wrong place. So I stop writing the chapter that I'm on and move to somewhere else in the book, something more interesting, or kind of. I'm quite a big fan of throwing an explosion in. So if a scene's doing it for you, it's time for something big to happen. So yeah, good explosion, shake things up a little bit.
Love it. Both excellent tips. Thank you both so much. I hope everyone's enjoyed watching. Just in case you missed the start, we've got James Goodhand talking about Man Down, and Sarah Daniels talking about The Stranded. Get both of them immediately, read both of them immediately, and let us know what you think. And yeah, thank you both so much, James and Sarah. And everyone do tune in tomorrow night at, I believe it's 7 p.m. for the next episode of Summer Shorts.
Thank you very much. Night.
Bye.
Hi everyone.